You had mentioned, and I found a comment you made really interesting about core values and sticking to core values. One thing that's different from City Council and Congress is there's much more compromise involved, and though it might not seem like it lately, but I think the art of passing legislation in Congress inherently requires people to compromise more so than, say, on City Council, where it's much easier to just kind of have it your way, whoever, generic you, on a 7 or 8 person City Council. How do you feel you're going to adjust going from City Council to Congress?
I think I've been able to show, I think I will adjust well. I think that I've been able to show over the last years that I'll work with anyone in the community, whether it's fellow members on council, whether it's the business community, whether it's the activist community, and probably most importantly, whether it's my constituents and neighborhood association leaders and members on any issue that's important. And by that same token, when our values or our goals depart, I don't mind going head to head. I mean, I've worked with developers on issues where I feel like we both wanted the same thing for El Paso. And then when I felt like what a developer or a group of developers wanted was not in El Paso's best interest, I fought them. But I always did so in the spirit of what is best for El Paso. It was, and you can ask around town and ask with the people I served on council. It was never personal, and it was never a battle to the bloody end. I think of Eddie Holguin, someone whom I respect a lot and worked the last 6 years with on City Council. We disagreed on any number of issues, from Project Arriba to the tax rate to the budget to points in between. But when we both saw some common ground, we seized it, we worked together, and I think I left the city on a friendly basis with Eddie and continue to respect him. And that goes for all my colleagues on City Council and in the community. So I think I bring that same spirit of willing to work and listen and hear out anyone as long as it involves moving El Paso's agenda forward.
I kind of keep coming back to this idea about where the nation seems to be going, or in particular where Congress seems to be going, where there seems to be a focus when it comes to the budget,
right,
on cuts only. Can we get there with just cuts only, or do we have to examine revenue increases in addition to cuts only?
Right.
Or in addition to cuts, I should say.
Right.
And then we've got a follow-up after that.
Yeah, great question. The number one priority for this country is jobs. And it's jobs, and it's jobs, and it's jobs. And where I think the Republican/Tea Party leadership is completely missing the boat is the famous war room line from the 1992 Clinton campaign, "It's the economy, stupid." And so when you have 11% unemployment in El Paso, as we did this summer, an unacceptably high level of people, fellow El Pasoans who are out of work, your obligation, in as much as you can do anything at the federal level, is to do what you can to get those people back to work. And you cannot do that simply by cutting. Are cuts important? Over the long term, absolutely. You have kids, I have kids, as our kids have kids, their ability and options and opportunities in life are going to be significantly curtailed if we don't get our national debt under control, because every dollar that they pay in taxes is going to go right out to China or to someone else who's financing our extravagant government. However, in the short term, we've got to get people to work. And so you cannot do that through cuts alone. You've got to spend money on infrastructure, on building, and on our ports of entry, and on our unique assets that we have here in El Paso. How do you pay for that? I think that you do need to re-examine tax rates. I think you do need to re-examine loopholes and options that especially high earners have to not pay taxes on income that they're receiving. I'm frankly very open to looking at a solution that takes away all deductions and all loopholes across the board and lowers tax rates for everybody. It's incomprehensible to me.
The Steve Forbes kind of plan?
Well, no, I don't know if I'm ready for a flat tax, but it's incomprehensible to me that GE, one of the wealthiest corporations in the world, didn't pay taxes last year. How does that happen? It happens because we have a broken system in Washington. You're not going to fix that system, frankly, by sending the same people up there year after year. It's the definition of insanity to keep doing the same thing and expect a different result. You're going to have people like me who are willing to stand up and make some tough decisions about where you're going to cut, where you're going to spend more, and whose preferential treatment, loopholes, and tax breaks you're going to do away with. I'm willing to do that. And I was pleased to see that part of the way that President Obama wants to pay for this almost $500 billion in terms of his jobs program comes from doing away with tax breaks. At the same time, you do, let me say this, you do have to be very careful that you don't make too radical a shift too quickly, because it also impacts the economy and it impacts people's willingness to invest and spend and hire. And as a business owner for the last 12 years, I certainly understand that. But to answer your question, you cannot cut your way out of the problem that we're in today.
So I kind of find a paradox here. If the best decision, and you said you'd be willing to talk about cuts and other stuff like that, you're willing to step up. If the best thing for the country is to make cuts that negatively impact El Paso, how do you vote?
No. I vote no on anything that negatively impacts El Paso. And
so cuts everywhere else, save El Paso, protect El Paso.
It's not a paradox, and I'll tell you why. The short term, I think you're going to have to spend more. And some people don't want to hear that. And some people think that all we do to save our economy is cut. And I just don't think that'll work. And I especially don't think it'll work in a place like El Paso that's 2 points higher in its unemployment rate than the country and 3 or 4 higher than the state of Texas. We need jobs in El Paso, and that's what we need to focus on. We need to spend money to get those jobs cranking here in El Paso. Short term, that adds to the debt. Let's be really clear and honest about that. So long term and middle term, you have to have a plan to address that debt. But that's a plan that extends to 2035, 55, and 75. You look at the Simpson-Bowles Commission that is comprehensively taking a look at all of these issues and offering up some tough choices that a Congress at some point is going to have to make, or we can continue to look the other way and just say, you know what, it sucks, but I'm going to let my kids pick up the mess. I'm not willing to do that. Let me give you an example of a similar, much smaller in scale, but similar situation that we faced at the city. In 2004, before I was elected, the voters of El Paso decided that there would be a one-time bailout, which obviously means spending money of the police and fire pension fund, which could not meet its long-term obligations. So the city had known about this problem since the 1990s. So for successive administrations, from the administrations in the 90s through the administrations at the turn of the century, we knew about this problem and we didn't do anything. The city council that I was a part of in 2005, 2006 said, you know what, we're going to meet our obligations to these policemen and these firefighters and policewomen and women firefighters who put their lives on the line and in some cases sacrificed their lives for the citizens of El Paso, and we made a deal with them that when they retired, they were going to receive these benefits. And we could no longer fulfill our commitment. Now, it wasn't going to happen now that we were going to default. It was going to happen, 10, 15, 20 years from now. But the political courage existed when I was on the council with everyone else that I served with to actually do something about it. So we put $200 million, which is a lot, that all of us are going to have to pay back. We put that into the pension fund, but we didn't just do that. We also insisted on structural reforms, governance reforms. There's now more city representation and less firefighter and police union representation on that board. There's now better rules and systems and checks in place to make sure that we don't run into that same problem. But what I'm trying to say is we faced up to a tough problem that made it harder for us to keep a lower tax rate, meant that we had to sacrifice in other parts of the city, and was a decision we could have kicked down the road 5, 10, or 15 years, but decided to take that on. I'm willing to do that if elected to U.S. Congress. I'm not in there for life. I'm not going to go in there for 16 years. If there is a vote for a constitutional amendment to limit the terms that a U.S. congressman can serve, I am the first one in line to vote for that. I think our congressmen serve way too long.
Okay, I'm sorry. Don't you feel like that inherently affects the voters and impacts their freedom of speech? If I so choose to elect somebody, if you become congressman and I like you, and if I so choose to keep sending you back because I think you're doing a hunky-dory job, why should government be in a position to tell me who I can and can't send to Congress?
Because when you're in Congress for 16 years, you become closer to the leadership in your party, in this case Nancy Pelosi. You become closer to your colleagues up on the Hill, and you lose touch with your community. There's a reason that it's constitutionally mandated that you can't elect a president for more than 2 terms. If 8 years is good enough for George Washington, if 8 years is good enough for some of the best presidents that we've had, then 8 years is good enough for our congressman from El Paso, Texas. I commit that I would serve no longer than 8 years if I were lucky enough to be elected and if I were lucky enough to be re-elected by the voters of El Paso. And I think that's one of the key problems, and frankly why we don't make tough decisions in Washington, D.C. We're entrenched up there. We are the people who are elected to Congress year after year after year. Their main job becomes getting re-elected to Congress year after year after year. And in order to do that and to cover their behinds, they don't make tough decisions because they don't want to have anyone run against them and have a position. You know, and the voters in El Paso know that I'm not like that. I'll take a tough stand on a tough position. I'll defend it. I'll own it. And, you know, win or lose, that's who I am. I can't name a position, or it's hard for me to name a position that the congressman's taken in that same vein. And frankly, he's not alone. It's a disease that runs rampant in Washington, D.C. People don't make tough choices up there. The country, given the recession we just came through, the recession that we may be about to enter again, the 2 wars that we're fighting thousands of miles away from here, and the precarious situation of the world economy, right now, more than ever, we need leadership and we need people who are willing to make tough decisions, and we don't have that today.
Well, right now,